tourism, the nightlife, nightclubs, the beach, restaurants, hotels, these are all part of an ecosystem that, when run efficiently, can create jobs, create tax revenue for governments, and add to GDP. Unfortunately, Nigeria has not received as much tourism revenue as she should have in the last few years. Data from the Stellenbosch University in South Africa from 2019, before the pandemic, showed that global travel and tourism added about $8 trillion to global GDP. And that is about 10.3% contribution to the global economy, creating about 330 million jobs in the process. Now, recently, Nigeria has been involved in some controversy with tourism, with the Lagos-Calabar highway, removing some tourism businesses which had to be sacrificed for the highway to be built, and also an environmental impact assessment not quite being completed before the process has begun, according to what we've learned. But recently, in the last few days, there's been a massive wedding that took place in another part of Africa that reminded the world that tourism on the African continent is incredibly lucrative and incredibly profitable. Now, of course, knowing that I've mentioned marriage and weddings, I'm probably going to be teased by Dr. Ruben Abati, but that's fine. Let's get to the story. All right, so we are on the 13th floor of the coveted Echo Atlantic Properties, thanks to the good folks at H Lifestyle. And we're still talking about the nightlife, tourism in Nigeria. And we're going to get to that viral wedding that took place in Egypt this month that made headlines everywhere. So first off, we're going to meet the couple, starting with the groom, Anchor Jane. Now, Anchor Jane is a fintech billionaire. He's the founder and CEO of Built, which is a rewards program that gives points to Americans who pay their rent on time monthly. The rental points can be used towards a down payment for a home or other purchases.
So if you look at our generation today, cost of living just keeps going up, right? And so if we could start to say that your biggest expenses, starting with rent, are actually rewarding you, and even better, taking you to that next step in your life and career, home ownership is a huge part of that. And so we worked with Fannie Mae, with Freddie Mac, with FHA, and said, first of all, why is paying your rent on time not helping qualify you to buy a home? I mean, by the way, the best
Otherwise,
predictor,
you're stuck in this,
totally,
this horrible,
this cycle,
endless loop.
And look, at the end of the day, paying your rent is the single best predictor of paying a mortgage on time, right?
Okay.
And so we said, if you can do that, that should get you a mortgage. And then why can't you use your points to cover the down payment?
Anchor's net worth is estimated at $1.2 billion. In January of this year, the company had a successful $200 million funding round that valued it at over $3 billion. Now let's meet the bride. Erica Hammond is a former WWE wrestler. She left wrestling to become a fitness coach and started her own boxing fitness club, Rumble Boxing. So her husband better behave himself during this marriage. The couple met in the most romantic place any two people can meet, the gym. Sparks flew and they got engaged later in November of 2022 with plans for a destination wedding in 2024. As far as tourism is concerned, Anchor Jane wanted to get married in space. Yes, space. Speaking to People magazine, the groom said, "My first pitch to Erica for the wedding was to get married in space." The bride wasn't so enthused. She said, "I was like, I don't want to die on my wedding day." The World Economic Forum released a report this year saying that space is a potential $1.8 trillion economy by 2035. But when we spoke to Nikolai Christov, who is the lead at space technology at the World Economic Forum, he said space tourism isn't necessarily part of that valuation.
That's a great question. And I think this is the one that the public also tends to ask of itself. Now, I think it's important to remember that we're still talking about single digits in terms of commercial tourists flying today. Of course, this makes the news, especially when you have famous people going up. They talk about it. They talk about the experience. Now, actually, in the report, we don't foresee the space tourism industry to grow into astronomical numbers by 35. It will grow significantly, but we're still talking about single-digit billion market versus the 1.8 trillion that we talk about as a whole space economy over the coming 10 years. So it's still a small fraction. Now, I think it's important in helping promote activities and showcase what space is about. There's this famous overview effect that people talk about when they see Earth from space and they come back with a different perception of you don't see borders, you see how fragile the atmosphere is, how thin it is. So I think it's an interesting addition to the whole discussion of why space is important. But again, it's important to note that it's still a very small part of the entire space sector.
By the way, if you want to get married in space, there's a company that offers that service, incredibly so. It's called Space Perspective, and couples can use them to say, I do, for about $125,000 per person, which basically comes to about $250,000.
Probably this morning we got to go.
But back to our couple on planet Earth. They picked Africa for their wedding destination, as I said earlier. Egypt, the largest economy in North Africa, was chosen. The bride said of her husband, Angkor went to Egypt as a child and teenager with his family and had always talked about how it was so inspiring and one of the best experiences and trips he had ever been on. So in early 2023, the couple went to Egypt. They explored the Sphinx and the pyramids, and she instantly fell in love. And she said, then I too knew how special of a place Egypt was. But before heading to Egypt, the couple took 68 guests on a pre-wedding trip to South Africa. They stayed at the Singita Safari Lodge at the Sabi Sand Natural Reserve. Tourism is huge to South Africa. Arise News hosted the South Africa Tourism Board back in September of 2022.
South Africa has got a very diverse offering when it comes to tourism. You can travel there for various purposes, whether you're coming for business conferences or whether you're coming for leisure in terms of family holidays. It's all possible. It's all there. But what is even more interesting is that we have a variety of lifestyle events that really draw the rest of the African market to come to South Africa. And that's gained quite a huge popularity. As we speak right now, we are gearing up for one of the biggest lifestyle events that is hosted in Johannesburg. This is called Delicious, which is really a showcase of music, culture, entertainment that happens in September in Johannesburg.
As far as tourism expenditure on the domestic side in South Africa, we're talking about what local South Africans spent on tourism in the nation within the last few years. 2022 saw a rebound that took it above 2019, which was the pre-COVID levels. In 2022, South Africa's domestic tourism expenditure came out to 435 billion rand, about $25.6 billion. This, of course, was higher than what we saw in the pre-COVID period of 2019, which was 334 billion rand, about $23.1 billion. 2020, as you know, was impacted by COVID, 224 billion rand, just $13.6 billion. 2021 was a rebound year, 286 billion rand, about $13.6 billion. Now, as far as inbound tourism, what foreigners spent coming into South Africa for tourism, 2022 didn't quite meet up to what we saw at pre-COVID levels. It was 71.1 billion rand, about $4.1 billion. Pre-COVID, it was 121.5 billion rand, $8.4 billion, so double what we saw in 2022. South Africa tourism also saw a rebound in visitors. Now, even though the spending didn't quite meet up to pre-COVID levels in South Africa as far as inbound tourism was concerned, the number of visitors still rebounded from 2022 to 2023. South African tourism saw 8.5 million visitors in 2023, up 48.9% from 2022. Now, the couple then chartered a commercial aircraft to take them to Egypt from South Africa to the wedding. The aircraft was from, yep, you guessed it, Egypt Air, the flag carrier for the nation of Egypt.
Where are we going? To Egypt!
Enjoy your flight.
Thank you, Kevin.
We have a choice.
Yeah.
I have a car that we can take you and I right off the gate, two of us, go.
Feels like that's
And everybody else within 20 minutes. Or we can just all wait.
Egypt's tourism revenues reached a record high of $15 billion in 2023, surpassing the previous records of $12.5 billion in 2020 and $13 billion in 2019, before the January Revolution and the COVID-19 pandemic, respectively. Egypt also welcomed a record number of international tourists in 2023, 14.9 million of them, exceeding the peak year of 2010, which was 14.7 million, and the pre-pandemic year of 2019, which was 12.9 million. As far as what was spent in South Africa on their pre-wedding safari celebrations, we took an estimate of the 68 guests plus the couple themselves, which came out to 70 people. This was over a period of 6 nights in South Africa. That was at a cost of $2,000 a night. We made an assumption it was 2 people to a room, so 35 rooms at a cost of $2,000 a night is $70,000 a night. So over 6 nights, that would come out to $420,000, not including the cost of the flight to get everyone over to South Africa. As for the cost of the wedding in Egypt, which included celebrities, the pyramids and the Great Sphinx in Giza were briefly closed to the public to make way for the tech billionaire's wedding. The couple took beautiful pictures in front of Egypt's famous tourist attractions. The estimated cost for the wedding was upwards of $3 million. So you saw the best of Egypt, the best of South Africa being displayed by a plethora of global influencers and celebrities, showing how much they were enjoying themselves for this wedding that took place in Northern Africa, and also the pre-wedding celebrations that took place in South Africa. Essentially, Nigeria has to catch up. We took some data from the World Bank, essentially looking at international tourism receipts from 2017 to 2020. The World Bank data doesn't differ too much from the other data that we've shared from Egypt and also from South Africa. If you look at the data, look at this chart that we have in front of you. Egypt in blue, earning $8.6 billion in 2017. 12.7 billion in 2018, and then peaking at 14.2 billion in 2019 before the pandemic cut that down to under 5 billion in 2020. South Africa in orange, averaging $9 billion from 2017 through to 2019 before the pandemic cut that down to 2.7 billion. And look at Nigeria in color green, 2.6 billion in 2017, under 2 billion in 2018, under 1.5 billion in 2019, and then look at 2020, $321,000. So the message is pretty much clear. From foreign exchange to creating jobs to positive word of mouth, it is important that nations like Nigeria and others on the African continent that are not quite at the level of a South Africa or a Egypt do what they can to boost tourism in order to bring in the positive inflows that accompanies them, as well as, reducing insecurity, not only to bring in foreigners from overseas, but also boosting domestic tourism from within the country. Tourism is essential to the GDP of any nation.